Okay, welcome back. It's Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday, and then another weekend. Zoom. Zoom, zoom, zoom. First up tonight, Henry NIman is here. Now, what we're going to talk about is also unique, something that we have never spent a program doing before, and we need to do this. It has to do with vaping. What's vaping? Now, some of you certainly know about it. Most of you probably have read about it. I first came across it when I went into my bank, and on the door, in stick-on letters, it said, "No vaping within 15 feet of the door." And I had to go ask, and I said, "What is that?" So I didn't know. This is, several years ago. But it's something that, I guess it's kind of mainstream among young people, but we're going to find out, because what's happening now, there are hundreds of confirmed cases and probably thousands of unconfirmed cases of really severe damage to the lungs from vaping. Henry, welcome back. Tell us more about this.
Well, it's good to be back. And as you said, there has been it's really an outbreak. So, I usually cover infectious diseases, but this is a lot like an outbreak of infectious diseases, but it's related to the vaping, and it's really got the CDC's attention. They held a telebriefing on the 23rd of August, and then one on the 6th of this month, in association with an early release MMWR, and then they just had another telebriefing today. And it is fairly alarming that these generally relatively young people are checking in. First they see the doctor and they have a cough, and they kind of have some usually milder symptoms that kind of progresses, and then they end up getting hospitalized, and they frequently end up on ECMO machines, which is
that's catastrophic. That's kind of the end of the line, ECMO.
Right. And speaking of the end of the line, tonight the 8th death was announced in the U.S. now, and those have been number 8, and they've been pretty much in rapid succession. The 8th one was today in Missouri. And in his case, he was in his 40s. He had no previous problems with his lungs. He actually started vaping in the spring. I think he had THC, and it was to help him with his pain. I'm not sure what the pain was from. But, he really has not been vaping for very long, and he ended up dying tonight, and so he was preceded by seems the older case. The deaths are a little bit older than the general age.
What are we saying here? That vaping is something that really knows not much of an age boundary. That middle-aged people are doing it. That's kind of odd, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it seems that a high percentage of the severe cases are associated with using the device to actually inhale THC, which is the active ingredient of marijuana. So some people are basically using it in that vein, and I'm not sure if that's what some of these middle-aged people were doing. I know this one case, there hasn't been that much detail on the death, but the media report indicated that he was doing it to combat pain, and he just started doing it in the spring. And and he died already.
Hold on. This raises the obvious question. What about vaping is different than smoking a joint, for example? What is it about vaping? Go ahead.
Well, there's several different issues. There's I mean, it's a complex situation, and figuring out exactly what's going on is still kind of a mystery. These, these telebriefings by the CDC kind of said what they did know, but most of the information really they don't know yet. But it's becoming real popular with young people. I think the latest numbers were that 25% of high school students vape and 40% of seniors vape. And the numbers are going up in middle schools.
For almost half of seniors vape?
Right. That's what the latest statistics are. And there have been a big jump between last year and this year, so it's becoming increasingly popular. One of the kind of novel aspects of the vaping has been these flavors that were introduced, and and basically that became a concern because it was like they were hooking young people, by introducing these flavors, and some were doing it for the flavor, some were doing it for the nicotine that would be associated with that, and some were actually using it to smoke THC, and that's why the mystery is kind of complicated because you've got all of these different combinations out there. But recently, the FDA said they're going to put a temporary halt on the flavors, and a few states like New York and California actually outlawed the flavored versions because they say as a minimum, even though they don't know exactly what's causing these severe cases or the deaths, that is just a mechanism to hook young people and get them basically addicted to nicotine. And so they've kind of put a halt to those types of sales. But today's MMWR, just to give you an idea what the numbers are, as you said, when they first came out earlier this month with numbers, they had it about 225 or so confirmed or probable cases, and then an equal number of suspect cases. And they kind of tightened it up, and they said, well, they got 380 that are confirmed or probable, and they've got a case definition. So a confirmed case is someone who's been vaping in the last 90 days, and they develop these pneumonias that can be identified on X-ray, and they don't have any evidence of an infectious disease, so they're negative on various types of blood.
Excuse me, I'm confused too. How can they call it pneumonia if there's no evidence of an infection, viral or bacterial? I guess they're judging it on symptoms, just symptoms and X-rays.
It's got to be X-ray confirmed. So they take an X-ray and they can basically see the various types of
discolorations
in the lungs.
Yeah.
Right.
Here's. Go ahead.
And I was just going to say the probable cases are the same as the confirmed, but there's some evidence of some infection, but they don't think that the infection they detected is really serious enough to actually cause the pneumonia. So,
all right. So let me ask another question. Does this mean that vaping is an infectious problem more than an habitual exposure to this kind of fumes in your fumigation of your lungs? Is it an infectious process or a debilitating result from something that's really negative for you?
Well, it's really a debilitating result of something negative, but I mean it's kind of like an infection because these people keep on taking the vapors in and kind of progressively challenge their lungs to be able to handle this and take care of it. And there's a couple different versions. So that's why I say it's fairly complicated. I think with the THC, that they're typically inhaled. That they start out as an oil, and the device is basically heated up to very high temperatures to vaporize it, and then it kind of goes into the lungs. And so one of the tests that they've done is actually to take a bronchial lavage or get some type of lung tissue that they can look for lipids in the tissues, and so they do a staining for the lipids, and they designate it as lipoid pneumonia. So it's pneumonia caused by lipids.
This is getting stranger. Now, let me just read what the New York Daily News says today. This week, Governor Cuomo issued an emergency order banning the sale of flavored e-cigarettes. Residents of Michigan will feel the effects of a similar ban in 2 weeks. These impulsive, writes the New York Daily News, and unscientific acts, writes the New York Daily News, are in response to a report by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention that 530 people scattered across 36 states plus the U.S. Virgin Islands with a median age of 19 have been hospitalized with vaping-associated pulmonary illness, VAPI. Sadly, 7, now 8, according to Henry, deaths have been reported in 6 states. The New York Daily News writes...
7 states now.
7 states, thank you. 8 deaths, 7 states. The New York Daily News continues, these overreactions, the banning of flavored e-cigarettes, for example, would seem laughable if they didn't have such a great potential to inflict harm, both on tobacco smokers trying to quit and teen vapors who are more likely to use dangerous bootleg products. There were an estimated 11 million vapors in the U.S. in 2018. I'll stop there. This is a weird one. I don't know. There's something going on here. Lipid pneumonia? Huh.
Yeah, it's the lipid pneumonia, and that's why I say it's a complicated scenario, and there really isn't quite enough data. But most of the cases, about I think it's around 80%, have involved the THC, and so it's like the highest category is they've used THC. Some have used THC only. Some have done THC plus nicotine, but some have done nicotine alone. And I think there's a difference.
What the hell's going on, Henry? Is it the actual mechanism used to vape? Is that mechanism carrying some kind of compound in its construction, in its format, through the heating of it? What's going on here?
Right. Well, they've found I think it's vitamin E acetate in the lungs of a lot of the ones that are taking THC, and I think that the vitamin E is in the oils. So I think there's somewhat of a difference. I mean, the vaping industry is basically saying that they've introduced the product as long as 12 years ago, and that they use a water-based product, and there hasn't really been this type of problem until very recently. And the CDC has said that they started getting reports of cases in April of this year, and it seems to be pretty much U.S. based. That they're not getting these reports in other countries. Although in the call today, they did a call for physicians today, a COCA call, and they did mention there was one case that was just reported in Ontario. So, but it seems that most of the cases are in the U.S., and they started seeing these cases in April. And, like I said, there's been 8 deaths now, but those deaths have been all pretty recent. The first case was really the end of last month in Illinois, and then the second case was announced the beginning of this month, but apparently that case had died in July. And then, the next 3 cases were all like 2 weeks ago on the 6th, and then there was 1 case last week and 2 cases this week. So, look, all of the deaths have been announced within less than a month of the present time. And these numbers have gone up pretty dramatically. Like I said, the confirmed and probable cases were 380 last week, and they're 530 this week. So they've gone up 150, and those 150 include some that were not yet confirmed prior to this week, but many of them are new cases. So the new cases are being reported at a fairly high rate, and like I said,
all right, hold on. What's the morphology of this? All right, someone's diagnosed with VAPI. What can be done for them? Is this permanent structural damage to the lung tissue?
Well, like I said, most of these severe cases have only been reported in the last few months. So exactly
yes.
how reversible it is isn't clear. I mean, there are reports where they looked at the lungs of 18-year-olds and they look like the lungs of 70-year-olds. So they can basically see the damage, whether the damage can correct itself if they cease smoking. That still remains to be seen. One of the arguments that it is something fairly recent is that they looked at emergency room records just to see if this has been going on, but just unrecognized. And there was one case of this lipoid pneumonia that was quite a while ago, and I'm not sure if that was even related to vaping, but it was kind of described in the literature. And when they looked at emergency room records to see what things looked like a year ago or so, they didn't really see these cases. Occasionally people that did vaping came in and they kind of had a cough or something, and they've been treating some of the patients with steroids. They kind of give them prednisone, and they give them antibiotics because they think that maybe there is an infection. They just treat them that way because they've got. But in the past, that was about it. They would have a cough and they'd get some prednisone or antibiotics, and they would basically clear up and they'd be fine. They wouldn't be admitted and go into the ICU and go on ECMO machines. And, obviously they don't all die that get to that condition. I mean, there's literally 530 cases now. So
at least
so
that's what we know about. There could be 5,000 cases. We don't know.
But that's how many they basically have confirmed with X-rays, and most of these cases I think have actually been admitted to the hospital. So it's not just people go to the doctor's office, get a cough, and they give them prednisone and send them home. And, everything's fine.
Now, for those of you out there who we have to take a break here, who have vaped and who understand this. You have an advantage over me, at least. I really haven't been around anyone who's done this. I don't have any friends, so how am I going to know? all seriousness aside, these appear to be little devices. I don't know how they operate. Maybe batteries. I don't know. I've got to do a little research during the break here. But let's just use the term advisedly. If it's aerosolizing THC or some other very well-known compound, what's the problem? See, and I don't expect you to answer that, Henry, because we've made it clear, thanks to you, that the authorities don't know. So hold on, we'll come right back and explore vaping a little further. Okay, all right. All right. Now, as opposed to lighting up a joint or a cigarette or a cigar or a pipe, which involves combustion and the flammable issue involved with burning anything, vaping simply creates vapor. Huh? Funny is how that works, isn't it? Cannabis is typically vaporized at no less than 285 degrees, but no greater than 450 degrees. And tobacco vapes at temps between 250 and 300. Vapor has more in common with a cloud of steam than with a puff of smoke. A cloud of steam, suggesting moisture. And even though vaping reduces the effects of secondhand smoke, it doesn't mean you're not experiencing a drug's effects. The properties of vapor differ depending on what you actually vape. Different substances like tobacco or hash, or its different forms of substances like oil or plant matter, change the vaping process. Sometimes it's the substance in gaseous form, and sometimes vaping means inhaling liquid particles, there's that liquid, suspended in air as they cool after being evaporated. Either way, the effect is the same. Drug molecules are inhaled and land on the lungs, which have an enormous surface area to catch them. The molecules then pass directly into the blood and bypass the digestive system. From there, the effects hit your brain in about 5 seconds, which is almost as quick as injecting the substance. So that didn't exactly clear up all of my questions, but we've got an issue here. Cigarettes, smoke, very little moisture. Vaping, apparently lots of moisture. I'm just trying to find a thread to follow here, Henry. Go ahead.
Well, here's a little bit more information. I'm pretty sure that, those temperatures you gave, the higher temperatures are achieved when the oils are burned. And so the oils, that's one of the suspect causes.
Oils, lipids?
Is the lipids and the oils, I think, are used more for the THC. Most of the cases, have involved the user at least sometimes using it for THC. I mean, sometimes it's just a little bit of everything. That sometimes they use it for tobacco, sometimes they use it for THC, and sometimes others just use it exclusively for THC, and then others use it exclusively for tobacco. But the tobacco, I think, is more water-based and at the lower temperature. And the THC is at a higher base. And there's an assay that if they have the lung tissue, they can do a staining for lipids. And they talked about lipid-laden macrophages, so they can identify macrophages in the lungs, and they are just full of lipids. So they've been going around gobbling up these oil droplets, if you will, and it's not clear if the oil is just coming from the vapor or if the oil has kind of been incorporated into the lung tissue, and then it causes some destruction of the lung tissue, and then macrophages kind of come in and gobble up all the debris, and they just end up getting loaded with the lipids. So there's some suspicion that that the lipids, when they're heated at these high temperatures, basically go into your lungs. And, just from the biochemistry, that's just a bad combination because the cells, all are surrounded by a lipid bilayer, and it's kind of water and oil. They really don't mix that well. And when you go and vaporize the oil, and then it goes right into the lungs, then you've got, you're kind of bathing the lung tissue in oil, and that can kind of slide into the membranes and kind of really mess up the cells and probably kill the cells. And so you can be damaging the lungs just because you're essentially inhaling oil. So the oil itself is just not a good idea. And that apparently is how the THC is delivered. And so there's issues of whether people are using it for the THC, and that's causing problems. And some of the THC is kind of street drug kind of thing, so there could be contaminants in there. I had mentioned that there was this vitamin E acetate that was found, and that's probably a byproduct of the oils and ingredients that go in with that. So that kind of complicates it. What different people are using it for, and what the ingredients are, and what the ingredients can do in the lungs, especially when they're heated at these high temperature, and then they probably form these little...
All right, we have to try to differentiate in our listeners' minds between smoke and steam. Is that kind of one way to go about it? Is there two different things?
I don't know. That's the main thing, because both of them are basically in a form that's going to get into the lungs. And so it's got to be small to get all the way through and into the lungs. And I think that, cigarettes can do that too. I mean, the cigarettes cause their own problems with causing mutations and attaching to DNA. But I mean, that's what the difference is a lot of the problems from cigarettes really come from altering the DNA, and they kind of take a long time. The vaping, it sounds like, it can happen fairly quickly. I mean, this latest case, he's only been vaping for a few months,
that's bad. That's bad.
And he went from, being in good health other than pain, but his lungs were in good shape, to being dead, from the spring till now. It's not a really long time period. And, as far as the deaths are concerned, I'm just to give you the numbers. Today's report kind of gave you a little bit of demographics, and they've got 530 cases, of which 373 they had age and gender data, and what they found was that 2/3 of the cases, 67%, were between 18 and 34 years old. 16% were under 18. And 17% were 35 or older. And so, it's a pretty young population that is coming in with this pneumonia that they have to have,
but you did start out tonight by saying that 40% of vapors are middle-aged or older.
No, okay. Just to clarify, of the 8 deaths, I was able to find the age of 5 of the 8.
Oh, you're talking about the fatalities. I got it.
Right, and of those fatalities, all of them actually weren't even in the 35-year-old. They were all in their 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Quite a shocker.
There was one that was over 65, one that was over 55, one in the 50s, one in the 40s. Well, 2 of them were in the 40s. So, so they're old relative to the total population. But that's just saying that the younger people get sick and they end up in the hospital and they end up having to have breathing assistance. and they either take longer to die, and they haven't, gotten to they're still hospitalized, or they, basically recover in the sense that they can come off the ECMO machines and be released. But when they look at their lungs, even though they're released, they've got the lungs of a 70-year-old when they're 18 years old, and so the alarming aspect is that number one, the vast majority of these cases that can't breathe and have to be hooked up to breathing machines are they're under 35. 83% of the cases are under 35. Only 17% are over that. And and 60% are meet the definition, the CEC definition of a child. They're under 18, and that's what I had seen, that it was like 25% of high school students have vaped, and 40% of seniors in high school, and then it was.
Okay.
There was a significance. I think it was 10 to 15% of middle school. So I think that's one of the other aspects is they look kind of like a thumb drive, and they're kind of easy to hide, and I'm not sure how you ignite them if you actually just hit a switch and it's an electrical thing that kind of creates the vapors. But I think
it has to run on a battery. Then it's got to run on a battery.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but it's something that you can kind of discreetly use, and so kids can take it to school, and they can probably.
I looked at pictures of them. They look like EpiPens almost. They're just little pens.
Yeah. They're little bitty things. They kind of look high tech, and they're easy to conceal and easy to use.
Here's the problem. We have not come up with any real hard empirical data to suggest how long it takes to damage the lungs. This one guy damaged his lungs and was dead in 3 months, basically. So are we talking about millions of people who may be damaging their lungs permanently right now? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a possibility. Because, even the CDC numbers, they're not really giving real hard numbers, and it's hard to get hard numbers because the cannabis is illegal in a lot of the states. These are a lot of the users are under 18, so if they actually get interviewed, some states require that they have to be interviewed in the presence of a parent. And so, a lot of them, they ask if they're using it for cannabis, and they'll just say no because their parents are standing there, or they'll say, or if they're over 18 and there's not a parent, they'll say no because they're concerned about, breaking the law. And they may be confused now because, the FDA just announced that they're going to, prohibit the sale of the flavored versions until they can figure out what's going on. Yeah. But then today I guess they announced that they're going to start a criminal investigation, and their criminal investigation really is going to focus on the supply chain. They're going to be looking at, are there contaminants in here, and is that what's causing these deaths and these hospitalizations? And it really is it more to do with the source of the ingredients that are going into the vaping. But there's concern that by announcing their criminal investigations, they're not going after the users, but some users may take it that way, and then they'll figure, well, if they go and they say they're using it for cannabis, they're going to get arrested and thrown in jail or whatever. And so the investigations have, a lot of issues, as far as, trying to figure out what they had in common. Like I said, most of the cases did use it for cannabis, but not all of them. But it's possible that many of the ones that said they didn't actually just said they didn't, and so it could be that almost all of them did use it for cannabis. And
all right,
the
now, hold
cannabis,
on.
I believe, is more through the oils. Go ahead.
Okay. If you smoke cannabis or you vape cannabis, you're after the effects of the THC in it, if it has it in it.
Correct.
But in one case, you're burning it, turning into smoke vapor. And the other one, you're heating it, turning it into some moist or lipid vapor,
right?
That causes damage to the lungs. It's the same. This is bizarre. That you'd think logically that it would be this. Oh well, you're still ingesting THC cannabis one way or the other. So there's something in the delivery method that's doing this. Something's wrong. This is a big problem.
Well, like I said, inhaling oil into your lungs is not a good idea, and that's how the vaping works. So the vaping it is oil based, and it is heated to a higher temperature.
Excuse me, when you say it's oil based, we're still talking about cannabis THC. Does it somehow make the oil in the cannabis THC go into an aerosolized form, whereas burning it in a cigarette or a pipe doesn't do that? Is that what we're saying here?
Yeah, I mean, if you're burning it in a pipe, you're just burning the plant material. So the plant material has got the smoke, and the smoke has got the THC from the plant material. So the plant materials was burning. So that's just smoke, and it's smoke with THC. It doesn't have some of the other tars and nicotines that's in tobacco smoke. So the smoke itself is not that bad for the lungs. It's kind of like smoking, and smokers, some of the damage to the lung really comes more from the chemicals in the smoke than the smoke itself. The oils are actually putting this oil into your lungs, little tiny particles of it. And
so the oil is burned up and vaporized. No, excuse me. Right. It's burned up and turned to smoke, not oil vapor, when you burn it in a cigarette. All right. So we have two different forms of the same psychoactive ingredient. Well, we're running out of time. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, in one case, you're burning plant material, so that's what makes the smoke. In the other case, you're burning oil, so that's what makes the vapor, and that vapor is really just oil droplets. And so when it condenses, when it cools, you're essentially coating your lungs with oil, as opposed to, and one is going to be water soluble. So it's going to dissolve in your blood, and the other is going to be, water insoluble. It's going to be, basically.
So you're painting your lungs with an oil-based paint, so to speak, and it's clogging up the alveoli or whatever it's called. I don't even know if it's clogging
it. I think the tissue may disintegrate because it basically can penetrate the membranes, and so I don't know how functional cells are that are sitting in oil.
All right, yeah, go ahead, Henry. Sorry.
And so I think that's why the macrophages are full of oil. That the lung cells are really kind of disintegrating and forming little pieces of
and the macrophages are showing up to try to fight off a
they kind
threat.
Of gobble, they clean all that stuff out. Yeah, so they got that oil. Yeah. They know that they should have oil in your lungs. They go and they kind of phagocytize. They go and they gobble it up. And the cell debris they gobble up. And then when they stain the tissue, they go and they see these macrophages, and they're just full of lipids. So
how weird.
And that's what. And that's why they call it lipoid pneumonia, because they go and they see when they actually do a stain. Now it's a little tricky. They have to do a special kind of a test to do this. If they go and they take lung tissue and kind of fix it like they would for pathology for other types of stain, they go and they fix it with alcohol, and the alcohol basically draws out the lipids. So that so you have to prepare it a separate way to actually see the lipids, and that's why I say that it's all kind of new, and so they're just gathering data. So when you listen to the CDC telebriefings, they go and they say, well, they haven't identified a single agent. That they more have taken THC than have taken tobacco, but they have some that at least say they've only taken tobacco and they haven't taken THC. And others have basically done both. And, especially if they're looking, what have you done in the last 90 days? I smoke cigarettes at school and I take THC on the weekends or something. So who knows? But
all right. Let me wrap this up and then you come back. Hold on. We're running out of time. Here's the bottom line, dear friends. Stop vaping until this is thoroughly understood. What's happening to the lungs, how the tiny oil molecular almost droplets get in there and what they do to the lungs. Until we find out what's going on, don't do it. If some guy died after 90 days, and we don't know if one vaping session will potentially permanently damage a small, tiny area of your lungs. We don't know any of this. So go get your pipe out. Buy pre-rolled joints. Get brownies. Ingest. Have a good time. This is not worth the risk. This is, right now, very dangerous and very unknown. And I don't want any of you people doing this. We don't know. So please consider what we're suggesting and offering to you very, very carefully and very seriously. Henry, wrap it up.
Yeah, and what you said is accurate. And the problem is that, it's still a little bit mystery of exactly what's going on. It seems to be specific to the U.S. It seems to have really got going in April of this year. There's a reasonable chance that there's either an increase in the THC and the oil base, or new devices to heat it up to a higher temperature. It's unclear what it is, but the fact that you're seeing this type of effects over a very short period of time, it's kind of hard to say what the long-term effects are. And the younger people are probably going to take a little bit longer to have these effects, obvious. Like the ones that have died are a little bit older. Yeah. But it's fairly short that they've been on these devices.
We don't know.
If you're doing this for a couple of years, you may have people that go in the hospital now. If they keep on doing it, they will go back in the hospital a year from now, and their outcome may not be as favorable.
Okay, we don't know how long it takes to develop damage from doing this. 1 session, 100, it probably varies from person to person. Although there's a certain benchmark in there that you could probably eventually extrapolate. 10 sessions, you've got measurable damage somewhere. I don't know. But this is far too dangerous for anybody to be doing at this point, in my humble, quasi-informed opinion. So go back to the old way. Smoke a joint. Eat a brownie, a cookie, whatever. I think this needs to be put aside for the time being. Absolutely. Please, friends, be careful with this. This is scary stuff. Henry, thank you for bringing this up tonight. You did a marvelous job presenting it, and I hope our listeners are paying close attention. This is really a life or death potential.
Well, my guess is, at least in the near term, that it'll be in the news quite a bit because, like I say, most of the deaths have been in the last month. Frankly, all the reported deaths have been in the last month. And the numbers are going to go up even if everybody stops tomorrow, because there's a lot of these
That's right.
500 people are in the hospital.
That's logical. 500 in the hospital, 530 something. How many on ECMO? Do we know? Approximately?
No, they didn't break that down exactly how many, but the 530 is the current number. And like I say, it's 150 higher than it was a week ago. But that's the current number of probable and confirmed cases.
Yeah,
and,
we're going to, yeah.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it, and we'll see what it looks like. But I think the next month or two is still going to be pretty dramatic numbers.
If we find anything out of any substance, Henry, let me know. We'll bring you right back on to update this. We want to stay on top of it.
Okay, sounds
good.
Thank
you. Thank you very much.
Okay.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Dr. Henry NIman, PhD, brilliant man. If I sound dumb and uninformed, I feel a little dumb and uninformed about this, but we've got to learn. The authorities don't even know exactly what's going on here. So a word to the wise, and we will be back.